like Twitch didn't finish my. Well, actually, did finish my information. And we are back with some more Metal Gear Solid 5: The Phantom Pain. Just wanted to let you folks know this won't be a gameplay episode. This was going to specifically be catching up on the tapes, hence the title. 1 second, it sounds like we got some chop. I'm hoping this clears up. But as I was saying, this is specifically just going to be a tape catch-up run. Okay. Weird. I get good audio and then I don't. Damn, I hope this clears up. It's not as bad as it was, but still weird. What I may end up having to do is what I was kind of going to do was, since these tapes are a little lengthy at times, I was going to mute my mic until the instance of the tape finishing starts. But with the audio acting weird, I may just disconnect my mic until I actually have something to say. But if you folks like what you see as we go over these details that we missed over the course of the game, give me a like, follow, subscribe here on YouTube, both. Drop a comment, check out some of my other playlists. Follow the links from my Twitch to get to my YouTube. Follow the links from my YouTube to get to my Twitch. And wherever you folks happen to be, have yourselves a good morning, afternoon, evening, or night, and get comfortable. Let's get into this.
I learned of the vocal cord parasite's existence in literature belonging to the Foundation. It was little more than a theory. The question was, why doesn't...
Was hoping to cut down the game audio.
Homo sapiens among all primates have a highly developed language.
You know what?
Versus everything else. The missing link between the...
I'm just gonna go to mother base so I can decrease the sound of the tapes that the tapes are dealing with. I'm afraid to see this. I know it's been years. It's been a lifetime.
No, Didi, stop!
Didn't plan on letting these tapes sit this long,
Sorry.
but I didn't exactly want to throw a full nighttime episode into the tapes, folks.
Bad example for the man.
Didn't want y'all falling asleep to that.
He gets pretty lonely too.
But if you had to have something to fall asleep to, you know. Excuse me. Alright. Let us try this again.
I learned of the vocal cord parasite's existence in literature belonging to the Foundation. It was little more than a theory. The question was, why does only Homo sapiens among all primates have a highly developed language? Human versus everything else. The missing link between these was the mystery that gave rise to this theory. I was fascinated by the idea of their existence in the Dene creation myth. The Neo Dene, who first inhabited the world, were insect-like creatures. I came to imagine that those insect-like creatures could be humans living in symbiosis with the vocal cord parasites. But I had not the faintest idea of how I could resurrect them. That is when Skullface came to me. What he offered me was not just assistance with my metallic archaea research. He told me the vocal cord parasites really existed. And not only did they exist, they had already been brought back to life in the modern age. An ancient human cadaver, host to the parasites of the time. Cypher excavated such a cadaver from a permafrost region and isolated the DNA coding of the vocal cord parasites. Naturally, they were long dead and could not be brought back, but there was an alternate vessel they could use. A relative species of the Pentastomida discovered in China. It had adapted to live in the nasal cavity of animal hosts, but its genetic sequence showed signs of common ancestry with the vocal cord parasites. Ontogenesis, the path of an organism to maturity, is like a roadmap of the phylogenetic evolution of the entire strain. Cypher used this to effect a reverse evolution of the modern parasite and resurrect the vocal cord parasites. They interposed a developmental mechanism to the ontogenetic stage analogous to when the relative species first appeared, the point at which it split from the vocal cord parasites, forcing its evolution down the other path. The vocal cord parasite path. The larvae is produced by the vocal cord parasites. Reborn. I do not know in detail how Cypher accomplished this, but clearly they have access to high-level genetic technologies. Skullface said it was the work of a genius woman scientist, and that the relative species in question was first discovered by a group once called the Philosophers. I was tasked with modifying the resurrected parasites. He charged me with two demands. First, to add lethality to these organisms that had once lived in peace with man, by unleashing the larvae's latent desire to consume nutrients from the host's lung tissue, making them eat and eat until the lungs were destroyed. Second, to have both male and female inhabit the same host and copulate then and there, only when exposed to specific pronunciations continuously over an extended time. What he would do to the Dene if I failed. I had no choice.
So you got your chunk of parasites from the philosophers. I remember you mentioning a corpse you came across. An old man filled with many parasites, so you were obviously talking about the end. It's interesting that there was enough of him left to collect. They all blew up, but him, I don't know, it seemed almost like he blew up more so than the rest. He may legitimately have had more explosives or something. I have no idea how they built the Cobras. And then Skullface threatens your Dene, your people. Well, my philosophy has always been, while you were threatened, don't misunderstand me, people are still dead. There has to be an accounting for that. That's just the way that rolls.
I learned of the vocal. It was little more than a theory. Originally, the ultimate objective of the ethnic cleansing parasite project was the identification of not only languages, but of actual cultures. Language is deeply connected to ethnicity, but many languages are employed by multiple ethnic groups, and confrontation between those ethnic groups is by no means rare. If the cleanser parasites were to be a deterrent against ethnic conflict, they had to distinguish between groups using means other than pure language. The original plan called for this to be achieved by differences in the transmission vector. Each ethnic group has different lifestyle customs and eating habits. For instance, parasites living in shallow water and taken in through the skin could be used to target rice farming groups, or parasites using cows as their intermediate host would be ineffective against cultures that abstain from eating beef. But that is a lofty goal indeed. The current parasites mainly rely on droplet transmission. It would take extensive time to alter the transmission route. I eventually learned that the Ethnic Cleansers project had been shut down. It was Skullface who put it back into operation. But despite that, he told me to forget about the transmission route and just focus on language identification. I do not know why. I understand that the Chinese philosophers who discovered the relative species of parasite originally planned to develop a phonogrammic Alexia parasite. The left temporoparietal region is home to the part of the brain that I can just focus on language identification. I do not know why. And just focus on language identification. I do not know why, but it was Skullface who put it back into operation. But despite that, he told me to forget about the transmission route and just focus on language identification.
Caution,
I do not know
heavy
why.
mist anticipated.
I understand that the Chinese philosophers who discovered the relative species of parasite originally planned to develop a phonogrammic Alexia parasite. The left temporal parietal region is home to the part of the brain that identifies the phonetic symbols of the English language. They wished to create a strain that would parasitize that region and suppress its literacy functions. The brain area responsible for identifying the logographs of Chinese, meanwhile, is in the left middle frontal gyrus, meaning that even if native speakers of Chinese were infected with the parasite, their literacy would be unaffected. Old and new, east and west, there is no limit to the delusions of those in power. But this delusion threatens to become a reality. I have to do something to stop this. There must be something I can do.
You know, the more and more I hear this, the more and more it sounds like Fox died to me. Just its earliest iterations. And then he says Skullface told him to leave the, what was it, to leave the parasitized path alone.
But the current is and just focus on language identification. But despite that, he told me to forget about the transmission route
And focus on language identification.
I do not know why.
Yeah, it's understandable as to why. But his goal was to make sure that even if it was transmissible, or if it was still easily transmissible at this point, his goal was to make sure that it actually does the job. It's useless if it can spread anywhere and not understand what it's actually doing, and it's useless if it can't distinguish between languages or distinguish between which groups should and should not be dealing with a certain problem. It is interesting, though. I always knew that language was in the left hemisphere, but I didn't know different languages occupied different spaces. That's actually pretty cool. Well, what did he say? He said front middle gyrus for native Chinese speakers or something like that.
The Chinese philosophers who discovered the relative species of parasite originally planned to develop a phonogrammic Alexia parasite. The left temporal parietal region is home to the part of the brain that identifies the phonetic symbols of the English language. They wished to create a strain that would parasitize that region and suppress its literacy functions. The brain area responsible for identifying the logographs of Chinese, meanwhile, is in the left middle frontal gyrus, meaning that even if native speakers of Chinese were infected with the parasite, their literacy would be unaffected.
Interesting.
Development complete.
Is the left middle gyrus, is that where all understanding of language sits? Because I actually was wrong with that. He says the language centers, the normal language centers of you using your language is just on the left side, but the left middle gyrus is basically your primer. It's your dictionary. Is that where it always is? If that's the case, then it's possible to do something to that spot and just make it to where you may be able to speak it, but you don't understand what you read. Makes me wonder if that spot might be why you end up with dyslexic people. Like there's some sort of damage or a disconnect right there.
It appears.
Boy, all these race-based weapons. This is nowhere near the first time I've heard talk like this. I highly doubt it's gonna be the last, especially in the day and age of CRISPR.
I was looking at things wrong. It appears I was looking at things wrong.
What do you mean?
All of you. Until now, I had thought of your organization, Diamond Dogs, as a superorganism.
You'll have to explain that one.
The term refers to a unit of eusocial insects like ants or bees. While made up of many individuals, they behave as though they are one organism, with the queen as their nerve center. The close ties you share here reminded me of that.
Well, the boss's efforts do pull us all together.
I was not finished. I'm speaking in terms of homogeneity. You come from all walks of life, do you not? Many races and tongues, talents and pasts, complementing each other, influencing each other, making Diamond Dogs the unique group that it is.
Of course. We have no use for mindless drones around here.
Is that so? Then perhaps an organization like yours is a truer superorganism than the ants and bees.
Meaning?
Most organisms adapt to their environment by coexisting with other species. Take the cow, for instance. Its rumen, the first stomach, contains an incredible number of bacteria, which digest the food it has consumed. Without their help, the cow could not break down the fiber in grasses. The cow has to outsource its means of survival to them.
You don't say.
Man is the same. Some 100 trillion bacteria live inside the human intestines. Without the bacteria, they could not function properly. And it does not stop there. The stomach, the mouth, the skin, even the placenta contains bacteria that coexist with us. The same is true of parasites. In fact, the human immune system has evolved based on parasites being a part of it. Without them, the immune system can run amok and even damage other parts of the body.
This is all very interesting, but what does it have to do with Diamond Dogs?
A harmonious superorganism is made up not of a group of homogeneous individuals, but of diverse individuals that complement each other. That is what I saw in your group here. Then it occurred to me that man is a superorganism. Man's phenotype is not determined solely by his genetics. Some say if you mapped the genomes of all bacteria in the human body, the result would be over 100 times bigger than the human genome. The sum of man's genome and those of the organisms he coexists with, call it a metagenome, creates the superorganism we know as a human being.
Well, now that's quite a leap.
You think so? Then try a broader perspective. If our world were a human body, you would be parasites. You make a living by doing the dirty work that the world powers cannot handle themselves. From their perspective, you are likely a nuisance. But without you, pus would build up around the world, and autotoxemia, self-poisoning, would follow. The world needs your kind.
Thank goodness for that.
Skullfaced forced me to turn parasites into weapons. Creatures with which we are supposed to coexist. Meanwhile, that foundation I worked with focused solely on the human genome, apparently thinking that manipulating it would get them whatever new form they want. Both ways are mistakes. Neither is a true superorganism. I am Dine. By speaking with those living inside me, we enhance one another. and enjoy harmonious growth. Such was the original purpose of my research. You have made me remember this.
Well, it's an honor. You can travel the world, but you won't find another place like this. If the whole world was like this base,
Sean will say
I think the
shortly.
peoples of the world would bid farewell to fighting for good. Maybe that's what the boss wanted in the end.
Oh, maybe that's what the boss wanted in the end. Always hated that Metal Gear Solid 4 was never on the Xbox, but hey. And he considers Diamond Dogs a super organism. I agree. It's pretty odd that Ocelot wouldn't catch on to that initially. But then at the same time, dude's a soldier. I'm the type, I can have conversations like this with Cold Talker for days. It is what it is. But the world being a superorganism, diamond dogs being parasites, and effectively all other life being cells, organs, so on and so forth. I've come up with a thought like that before. It was actually a little different. It's based on the universe potentially being a living being, and all the planets and life forms are its versions of white blood cells, red blood cells, plasma, pus, so on and so forth. The rapid expansion of the universe is our universe, universal life form, or whatever. Me personally, I do believe in God, but even setting aside that, universal life form of any type, going through growth spurts. But there was something that he said. Hold on.
What do you mean?
All of you.
You'll have to.
While made up of many individuals,
Well, the boss's efforts do.
I was not finished. You come from all walks of many races, complementing each other.
Ah, yes, he speaks of diversity. What he speaks of is proper diversity, not the nonsensical diversity. He speaks of diversity because diversity is necessary, and not only do you get a bunch of people with a bunch of different looks and skin tones, you outright get a bunch of different ways of thinking, and that is useful. Even if you have ways of thinking that are detrimental, like, say, those troublemakers in my organization. But if you can mitigate those individuals and redirect them into being more useful, well, there you go. But if they can't be made useful, then choices have to be made. Whether they remain with you or they remain with someone else, that's just the way it's going to have to be.
Making diamond,
Of course.
But so long as it's diversity for its proper sense, as he says,
Of course.
we have no use for mindless drones around here. Yeah, people's lives are at stake.
most organisms adapt to take the cow, for instance. It's rumen, the first stomach. Without their help, the cow has to outsource.
Parasites. Yes, our body is laden with a lot of parasites. Parasites that we need, parasites that we build up. Our gut is full of them. It's how we break down our food. It's also how we break down toxins the fastest. When you're drunk or whatever and you're having a hangover or you're outright just sobering up, that's your body breaking it down, but your stomach has to do it first. Problem is, once you get to the stomach, that's the core. It's kind of like we've bypassed the defenses. We've got the strongest weapon here to protect the whole, to protect the body, but the enemy is, they're not at the gates, they're in the gates. So there's going to be casualties here.
It's means of survival to them.
You don't say.
Man is some 100 trillion bacteria live inside the human intestines. Without the bacteria, they could not function properly. And
No, we could not.
Stop there. The same is true of parasites. In fact, the human without them.
This is all very...
A hump but of diverse in some say if you mapped, the result would be over 100 times bigger than the human genome.
Well, now that's quite a leap.
If our world were a human body, but
Thank goodness.
Skullface forced me to turn. Meanwhile, that's apparently thinking that manipulating it would get them whatever new form they need. Skullface forced me to turn parasites into weapons. Creatures with which we are supposed to coexist. Meanwhile, that foundation I worked with focused solely on the human genome. Apparently thinking that manipulating it would get them whatever new form they want. Both ways are mistakes. Neither is a true superorganism. I am Dine. By speaking, I...
One second.
That foundation I worked with focused solely on the human genome. Apparently, meanwhile, Skullface forced me to turn parasites into weapons. Creatures with which we are supposed to coexist. Meanwhile, that foundation I worked with focused solely on the human genome. Apparently thinking that manipulating it
that's
would
it.
get them whatever
Yeah,
new
as he
form they
says,
want.
both
ways
paths
are
were
mistakes.
incorrect.
Neither is a true superorganism. I am
The only true method that
those
works is symbiosis. I've never really had a desire to fuse with the life around me, like, or things around me, like, say, cybernetics and whatnot. But that's the only real way something like that would work. We would still probably lose in the end, but the only way something like that would work is we would have to live side by side with whatever life we consider to be life, necessity, whatever it is. We could try and wage war against it, but all we're going to do is teach it why we consider survival to be so important. And it's going to follow suit.
inside me. We enhance one another and enjoy harmonious growth.
Symbiosis.
Such was the original purpose of my research. You have made me remember this.
Oh ho ho.
You can travel the world, but you won't find another place like this. If the whole world was like this base, I think the peoples of the world would bid farewell to fighting for good. Maybe that's what the boss wanted in the end.
Again, it's possible, but the world being like that base is kind of... There's less meritocracy there than you would like. I'll just put that out there and leave that at that.
The ethnic cleansers that Code Talker mentioned, they weren't Skullface's true goal. All we have is circumstantial evidence, but here's my theory. It was Cypher who started developing the vocal cord parasites as bioweapons, parasitic weapons, and Africa was the testing ground for them. As Code Talker said, their purpose is the ethnic cleansing of only those who speak a particular language. So they could do a weapon of mass destruction to eradicate specific groups, races, ethnicities, or colonies by the language they speak. Or a kind of absolute language control. Or maybe a tool for those arrogant fools to build some misguided utopia. I can see plenty of uses for them. However, in practical terms, they wouldn't be as dangerous as you'd think. Counteracting the parasites is easy, after all. Cut them out of your throat to save your life, or just don't talk. That also prevents the infection from spreading. So if the international community were to find out about them, they'd no longer be the threat they were conceived to be. In which case, their targets would be limited to minority groups as a deterrent or a terrorist tool. It's hard to imagine Cypher developing something like that as a main weapon for their arsenal. That leads me to think we've only tugged on one little thread in Cypher's grand tapestry. An obscure corner of their work, possibly forgotten altogether. In any case, things changed. When Skullface was forced to relocate to Africa and he saw that thread dangling. all the time he continued that research, he was secretly following his own agenda. The ethnic liberator parasites, his English language strain. Skull.
It makes sense. Such a weapon would be easy to find and find out about. But you say it's easy, simply cut your throat out. But what is a voice? A voice is emotion, a voice is communication, a voice is detection, a voice is warning. You might not be able to afford firing your weapon in certain instances. Striking a match, flipping a switch, you might have to say something as quietly as possible. You may have to convey a great deal of concepts in a very short deal of time. I could still see them using such a weapon, but yeah, as he said, not it being their main tool. As their main tool, it would be useless extremely quickly.
The ethnic cleansers that code, they weren't Skullface's true. All we have is It was Cypher who started developing the Parasite and Africa so they could do a weapon of mass destruction to eradicate specific or a kind of absolute language, or maybe a tool for those arrogant fools to build some misguided utopia. I can see plenty of uses for them. However, in counteracting the parasites is easy after all. Cut them out of your throat.
The utopia thought process is the cleanest one that I could come up with. It's the only one that makes sense. You start with language control, then you deal with the dissenters. Over time, the dissenting thoughts fade. People start to listen and believe in the state. And then here you are with this situation. So yeah, that was definitely going to be used to create some form of utopia eventually, probably based on the exact same thought process you had. Maybe this was the boss's will. If the world was like this base, let me see now. Anything else
Save your life or just don't talk. That also prevents so if the international community were to find out, in which case their targets as a deterrent or a terrorist, it's hard to imagine Cypher developing something that's an obscure corner of their work, possibly forgotten altogether. In any case, things changed.
That's what draws my attention, that obscure corner of their work. Because interestingly enough, when you have stuff left in certain corners, you tend to realize there's a little more corner there. So what else is in this corner of a dark room of a hidden vault underwater surrounded by sharks with artillery aiming at it?
Skullface said there were only 3 samples of the English language strain parasite, and I think we can believe him. Bringing his ethnic liberators' plan to fruition depended on creating an English version of the vocal cord parasites at all costs. But an English strain would have been useless to Cypher. Worse, it could have destroyed everything they'd built. It was the one type they couldn't allow. That means Skullface was forced to develop his English strain out of sight of Cypher's network. Naturally, he couldn't use the greenhouse facility Cypher had set up and filled with guinea pigs. Skullface must have found some secret place to create his precious few English parasites, hiding all evidence like a man cheating on his wife. Somewhere, an entirely standalone environment. And when his plan entered its final phase, he must have made the place disappear. Some little room, could be anywhere, but now nowhere at all. We'll never know where he did it. But to elude Cypher's surveillance, it couldn't have been big. I believe Skullface was telling the truth. There were only ever 3 samples of the English language strain.
Sounds quite plausible, especially when you break down the details. And then, as he said, some obscure little room, doesn't really matter, probably disappeared. There are over 7 billion people on the planet. I want to say around that time there are around 5 to 6. It wouldn't be hard to find English-speaking people. Wouldn't be hard to find people, teach them English, and then have them teach the parasites. It wouldn't be hard at all.
Development complete.
And it ain't like you plan on having those people survive. You need them to create more parasites. 3 strains, huh? The way I like to think of it is there's a 4th. It's possible it's just 3, but I like to think of it the same way I like to think of explosives. There's always another bomb. Now, Skullface may have been telling the truth, but that don't mean there's only 3 strains. As we know, Quiet had the 3rd, but yeah, that does not mean that there wasn't more. Oh, wait a minute. No, there were 4. There were 4, and we know there's 4. We saw Snake, or rather, my character, throw 3. We heard 2 explode. We saw the kid take 1, and Quiet was already infected. So, there's the 4th one.
Hewitt's dug up some interesting facts about our skull-faced friend. 9 years ago, he was exiled to South Africa, stripped of political power. The upshot's that he ceased being a serious threat, in Cypher's eyes anyway. They eased up on surveillance, giving him an opening to establish his own military unit, one that answered to his will alone.
Wait.
Man likely had no. They eased up on the upshot's that he ceased being a serious threat, in Cypher's eyes anyway.
Stupid.
They eased up on surveillance, giving him an opening to establish his own military unit.
Higher
one that
level
answered
stupid.
to his will alone. Those men likely had no idea their orders were coming from Skullface. They probably didn't even know the organization was a part of Cypher at all. Anyway, it was in South Africa where he found renewed interest in parasites. And when he discovered the vocal cord parasites, he began to make his plan. Wipe the English language out of existence. Free the world, not by taking men's lives, but by taking their tongues. In his eyes, the greatest symbiotic parasite the world's ever known isn't microbial. It's linguistic. Words are what keeps civilization, our world, alive.
Like I said, they are connecting points. They are how you convey a thought without gesture. Because if you're using gestures, you got to remember now, people are people. But before people were running around in houses with smartphones, Wi-Fi, Froyo, and fucking Teslas, we lived in caves, we roamed the plains, we hunted with spears, we were a hunter-gatherer species. Nothing has changed except what we put on our bodies. So when we see each other move, you better move peacefully or put them hands back by your sides. Words are the best way to convey anything. They could convey warning, they could convey fear, they could convey anger, hatred, love, jealousy. They could convey mixed emotions. I hate and love you right now. I can't stand you, but don't go anywhere. They are connecting pieces for our species. The level of importance that language has cannot be understated, and he understands this, which is why he wanted to take it away from us.
Skullface, there was something Skullface said. America is made up of many peoples, but those peoples never mix. Quite so. One nation, home to hundreds of different ethnic groups, many of whom stick to their respective living areas. Little colonies, not interacting with other groups, going out of their way to avoid one another, their land, organizations, relationships. Thus, the United States of America is no melting pot. It is more of a salad bowl. It is not made up from one people, but for its minorities to function in society, a common ground is needed. Language. Even if the country is not one. No, because it's not one, a lingua franca is necessary. English. American hegemonism was born from the illusion that English could unite diverse ethnicities. In taking in people from around the globe, America became a microcosm of it. Now the boundaries between it and the rest of the world have become blurred. However different our neighbors may be, English enables us to create symbiotic relationships with each other. If English can bring unacquainted neighbors together in America, this should hold true for the world. This salad bowl that is the world can also become one.
I mean, he's not entirely wrong. America most definitely is more of a salad bowl. We do have our little cliques. Not to mention, you then think about little territories like Little Italy, Little Chinatown. You know what I'm saying? Places that are also outright owned by like Japanese, Chinese territories, other nations. We are really more of a hodgepodge, but we do not mix like that. And that's, on the one hand, it's a bad thing because it keeps us separated, but on the other hand, it's a very good thing because it allows us to maintain our diversity. See, well, back to diversity. It allows us to maintain our diversity while at the same time having unifying factors. Push comes to shove, we can come together as Americans, but we aren't all Americans from America. Put it another way, it's a slightly different thought process. Still fits though. The way I like to say it, all Nazis were Germans, but not all Germans were Nazis. And then you think about the fact of, like, say if our nation is attacked, that diversity is going to come in handy, so long as it's, again, not too much of a detriment, or so long as the detriments can be redirected to be useful. But our diversity in this country is one of the reasons why it is, other than the obvious concept of the American dream, which that's a whole other conversation. That is one of the main reasons why people come here, is the diversity of thought and the possibility of different futures. We really need to get back to that.
A ruler's greatest wealth is not money or land. It is the number of individuals under his control.
Yep.
Subjects who work, consume, are there to be used as pawns in war. For a capitalist ruler, his people's power becomes his power. You are the same. With your diamond dogs, you spin it with your speeches. But what you're doing is bringing as much talent as you can into your little domain. Every person another feather in your cap. Yes. Since ancient times, every civilization's ruler has had the same idea. When people unite under one will, they become stronger than the sum of their parts. And the one will is the ruler's will. And what do rulers use to bring people together? Language. In the Old Testament, it is written that only one language was spoken in Eden. A shared tongue that united all of humanity. Mankind eventually grew aware of its power and harnessed that strength to build a tower to the heavens, the mighty Tower of Babel. This angered God, who splintered the language of man, and the tower was never completed. Languages emerged and the earth was divided as men went their separate ways. Every age is the same. A ruler's first order of business, after conquering new land, is to force his tongue on its people. Ancient Rome, Napoleon,
Approaching.
and now Zero. English is wreaking havoc around the world right now. The British Empire tilled the land with war as its hoe, then began planting the seed that is English. Eventually, American capitalism became the new instrument. To play its game of wealth, you only had to abide by one rule: English. By exploiting people's desires, English has become a leash that people gladly wear around their necks, it would seem.
Mixed bag. He's not entirely wrong. More what he's saying isn't so much that English is running rampant. Or rather wreaking havoc. When he's saying something like that, he's meaning it's spreading without anything that seems to be stopping it. It's almost like a virus in and of itself. But to an extent, I feel regardless of what nation you're in, if you're going to live in another nation, you need to learn that language. If for nothing else, then respect for that nation and respect for your own safety. Hold on. There's something that he said. There's a couple of things I want to poke at, but there's something specific that he said. Yes, yes. That is the whole thought process. It's not a matter of not caring about people, but when you get down to the bare bones, that's exactly what you're doing. You're gathering as much skill, as much power, as much talent, as much diverse thought process as you can in one spot. Same thing we're doing here, for obvious reasons. Regardless of why, regardless of caring about people or not caring about people or in between, we are adding many more feathers to our cap, and we're picking up a pair of pants and a jacket as well.
Consume are there to be used as pawns in war.
And yeah, that's another thing. It's always the ruler's way.
Power becomes you are the same with your since ancient times.
But
every civilization's ruler.
where's the
has
thing I
had
wanted
the
to poke
same
at?
idea. When people unite under one will, and what do rulers use to bring people together? Language. In the Old Testament, it is written that only one language was spoken in Eden. A shared tongue that united all of humanity. Mankind eventually grew aware of its power and harnessed that strength to build a tower to the heavens, the mighty Tower of Babel. This angered God, who splintered the language of man, and the tower was never completed. Languages emerged, and the earth was divided as men went their separate ways. Every age is the same. A ruler's first order of business, after conquering new land, is to force his tongue on its people. Ancient Rome.
There it is. That's what I was looking for. It took a little longer to get there. A lot of people theorize that when it came to slaves, especially like in the last 400 years, when it came to slaves, you learn a language that you were around simply because you were around it. Proximity and immersing yourself in that language, you are going to learn it. Which is true. But that's not what my thought was. My thought, and it might have actually been proven, but my thought is very simple. If I yell at you 1,000 times to do something and you don't understand me, whose fault is it? I teach you my language so that when I say something, you cannot say that you didn't understand what I told you. You understand full well I've made sure over the course of the last 15 years. That is why they force that language. It forces you into new thinking. It gets you away from your thinking. You don't say things like you used to that matter to you. You don't say things like Merry Christmas. You say Happy Holidays. You see what I'm saying? You don't say things like I'm not Jewish, so I may actually be going at this wrong, but like Happy Ramadan or whatever. You don't say something like that. You say Happy variation of holidays or some switch up. The point is, it moves you away from what you were to what they want you to be, so that you're easier to control. Now, whether that's for good, bad, or in between is not the argument. The argument is you are being redirected away from what you were. You could just as easily become something better. But the choice that exists is from the ruler. Do what I say, or we'll see what happens to you. And I conquered your lands. I don't think you want to see what happens to you.
Napoleon, and now Zero. English is wreaking havoc around the world. The British Empire tilled the land with war as its hoe, then began planting the seed that is English. Eventually, American capitalism became the new. To play its game of wealth, you only had to abide by one rule: English.
And that's the trap. That's what I was saying earlier. If you're in a nation, you need to be able to understand that nation's language, if for nothing else, than your own safety. But that's also the trap. Because you understand that language, well, you're much more useful to everybody, good, bad, and in between.
Ya'at e. You disappoint me. Have you forgotten my face?
Leave me be.
Development project has
You
been
won't
added.
respond to anyone else, so I figured it must be me you wanted to see. But now you won't even look at me.
Have I not suffered enough?
Not until you've eased my suffering first. To tell you the truth, old man, I'm in a bit of a bind. It's about your children. You know what I mean? The parasites. The ones that infect a man's throat, killing him if he speaks their language.
They must not be allowed to multiply.
You are allowed to live only in order to help me. But you don't want to, do you? So why not choose death instead? Because you want to protect the Diné and their land from me. That's your purpose, isn't it? Don't lose sight of that now. It's in your interest to cooperate. Because if you don't,
Madness.
the parasites can't detect your people's tongue. So I'll just have to resort to more heavy-handed means. I have the greatest respect for your people. I would rather avoid such a thing, but we don't always get our way. I was born a tiny mote in a mighty tempest, and until those winds abate, all I can choose is how to act when they blow me this way or that. Tell me, Code Talker, what happens to a man infected with a pair of your parasites? Can they be removed? Can the full-blown symptoms be prevented?
It is impossible to remove the parasites alone. They have too close an affinity with humans.
Then how do you stop the symptoms from developing? All right. I was hoping for an answer now, but perhaps you just need a little more time. I'll be back soon. I've set up shop, not far from here. we'll be seeing a lot more of each other.
If you're close by, then it is almost complete.
We're in the final phases. All that's left is to see if I can actually disable a nuke, with the help of your metallic archaea. Once that's done, I won't have to return here again, and your suffering will end, as will your people's. We're almost finished, Code Talker, each in our own way.
My only regret will be not finishing you.
There's nothing stopping you. I'm only alive because you want me that way.
Ridiculous.
As you wish.
Sun will rise.
My
momentarily.
regret is this misunderstanding between us. You and I, our goal is the same. We should be working together. A symbiosis.
You do not know my mind. I simply want the Diné bloodline to endure.
Really now? You're just another mote in the store. How you react to all the slings and arrows, that's what counts. That's why you call those squirming monsters your children.
What I have done is forbidden. Forgive me, all of you.
The world should be left the way it is. You of all men should know that.
It's hard to disagree with a lot of that. While progress is an extreme necessity, and especially when you consider the fact that we're an ever-growing species, so we're always going to need higher levels of resources much more quickly. There are certain games you don't play, certain things you don't mess with, and those parasites were one. Now, mind you, you weren't the first one, but you were the most recent and apparently the most efficient. At least you're aware that this is a game you shouldn't have been playing. But, hold on.
Because if it's in
He's
your
obviously
that's your
holding the
purpose.
Diné over his
Because
head.
you
We
want to
already went over
protect
that.
the Diné. So why not choose? But you don't want to, do you? You are allowed to live only in order to help me. But you don't want to, do you? So why not choose death instead? Because you want to protect the Diné and their land from me. That's your purpose, isn't it? Don't lose sight of that now. Because if you don't, the parasites can't detect your people's tongue. So I'll just have to...
That is so interesting. So the parasites can't detect their tongues, but the parasites are supposed to be what gave man language. Now, if memory serves, science has actually proved it's something completely different. I actually have to do my research on that. But for the purposes of the game, the parasites gave man language. Sorry about that. But they can't detect Navajo, which is what he is Navajo. That is so interesting. So there are some languages that can't be detected. I wonder if Navajo is used the same way most languages are. Usually we will move our mouths and throats and larynxes and all of that in certain ways, but it makes me wonder if it's more of a, how can I put it? When we speak, just like when we move, we create more of a pushing motion to create movement. We lift to walk, we push to reach for something, we lift to get out of bed. We don't just rise, we're not just pulled. You see what I'm saying? But it makes me wonder if the Navajo language is more pulled from the throat and all of that instead of built from the throat up. like a scaffolding, almost like it builds itself from the top down instead of being built from the ground up like most scaffolding is. I'm not a linguist, so I have no doubt I'm severely reaching.
Resort to more heavy. I have the greatest respect for your people. We don't always. I was born a tiny mote in a mighty tempest. And until those winds abate, all I can choose is how to act when they blow me this way or that.
True, but that's also a nice way of saying you're mostly exempt from the things you do. While yes, you say it's your choice to act when they blow you this way or that, it kind of sounds like you're willing to be blown about. Like this weather vane you speak of.
Tell me, Code Talker, what happens to a man infected with a pair of your parasites? Can they be removed? Can the full-blown symptoms
What the fuck?
be...
That's crazy talk. He's a dog. You hear me? A dog. So you think he's a dog? I get it. Keep a freaking lid on it. What's important is he's one of us. Regardless if he's a dog or wolf. He's a dog.
It's not this conversation that was weird to me. We've heard it before. The issue was that I couldn't fast forward because of this conversation.
Invented?
It is impossible. They have two.
Then how do you stop the symptoms from developing? All right, I was hoping for an answer.
So he didn't
now,
give him the
but perhaps you
information
just need a little more
about the
time.
Wolbachia, or the information
back
about
soon.
the
I've set up
removal
shop
of the
not
vocal
far from
cords.
If you're close by, then
We're in the all that's left is to see if I can actually disable a nuke. With the help of your metallic archaea. Once that's done, I won't have to return here again. And your suffering will end.
Yeah, see,
As
it's still
will your
never really
peoples.
clarified.
We're almost finished, each in our own way.
Yeah, I mean,
Each
your
and
suffering's
we're
gonna
almost
end, your
fin-
people's suffering gonna end, and he's definitely gonna kill you, but that's not the point. Metallic archaea couldn't have been his primary weapon either. Dangerous as it was, it could not have been his primary weapon. Yeah, it at the time required a mech to fire. Sure, you have the skulls, but it legitimately wouldn't take much to deal with the skulls. Like, if you can get enough people not panicking, all that kind of weapons fire on 4 skulls, 8 skulls, it's a wrap. Say, why are they standing still? They're drinking. Open fire, open fire. Let me see.
Code Talker, each in our...
my only regret,
There's nothing stopping you.
my only regret will be not finishing you.
There's nothing
What opportunity did you have to finish him? Were you the one who healed him? Definitely begs questions, because then it begs the question: who's the one who infected Quiet? Because it wasn't him. He wasn't aware of it, other than what infections she already had.
Forgive me, but my schedule has changed. The time for grace and good manners has now run out.
Please. Torture will not work on me. Surely you know this.
Damn.
Oh, I have no intention of getting rough with you. You haven't been beaten. Your hands aren't even tied. Just like me, you live in symbiosis with countless parasites. What wounds I might inflict, they'll patch right up. You might feel considerable pain, but I've no doubt you can withstand it.
Then what do you plan on doing?
I have a soldier standing outside. Nothing special about him, except that he always obeys. I have given him one instruction. Whenever I ring this bell, he passes on a message for me. That message is simply, go.
What is this?
After that, though, it gets complicated. The message will arrive at a room. A little bigger than this one. Nothing special. Some of your people are in this room, surrounded by my men.
Enough of this.
They pick them at random. No regard for age, gender. In that, I suppose, they're different from you. Not as discriminating. They tied them up, one by one, blindfolded them. We had to maintain order, you understand?
You bastard.
Go. When they hear that, my men will pick one of your people and infect them with a parasite. Your parasite.
It won't work on my people.
True. The vocal cord parasite doesn't respond to your language. But what about English?
An English strain. It exists.
A ring of this bell, and they infect one person. If that person abandons the Navajo language, the English strain will trigger symptoms.
You monster.
So, it's quite simple. Every time I ring the bell, another of your people is infected.
Don't do this.
I don't want to do this. I'd rather not have to ring the bell, which is why I'm hoping you will talk to me.
What do you want? What else could you possibly want?
You know the answer to that. How to prevent the symptoms caused by the parasite.
You cannot control it like some slave. Forget the idea.
Forget it. Unlikely.
I will never tell you. What have you done?
You made me do that.
You black-hearted...
Settle down.
Caution.
Don't
Heavy
use it again.
anticipated.
Well, that is up to you. All you need to do is tell me what I want. How to prevent the vocal cord parasite symptoms.
Why? Why do you need to know?
The adult soldiers at Bwala are all dead.
What?
The parasite traveled downstream.
How?
It would appear that he was involved. Another demon who woke up from 9 years of slumber. As a result, the vocal cord parasite spread through the village.
I told you this would happen.
It was an unfortunate accident. He is becoming an annoyance. He may stumble upon the truth sooner or later, but I suppose that is really of no consequence. One day, he too will pay for what he has done.
Black Anna. The real demon is you.
You know, this incident made me realize something. You are right. I should have acted with more humility. These creatures cannot be controlled. All the more reason I require a means to stop them.
There is no such way.
Oh, really?
Wait! Don't ring it again.
It is up to you. Out with it!
I see now. There must be more to it than that.
What?
They are in you. You use this land to breed more of my children. And not just here. No. In pursuit of your ethnic cleansers. You sifted through many language strains. Finding hosts. Breeding more and more. You would have been infected in the process. Infected with countless strains. Most likely your mother tongues as well. Romania, Northern Transylvania. You found that one too. Yes, the Hungarian strain. That responds to the CK's dialect.
Silence!
Black Anna. It is you who shall pay.
Is this your retaliation, old man?
Let my people go. and never bother them again. You heard me. What now? What? No! What are you doing?
I am not afraid. I probably have every language strain inside of me, meaning all the world's languages are already lost to me. But that suits me fine. If need be, I myself can produce whatever strain is needed.
And that means nothing to you. If you are infected, you can never again speak your mother tongue. Otherwise, you will die. As will every one of your countrymen.
A few words here and there won't trigger the symptoms. And besides, the time is not yet right to show this face in my homeland. Not until my revenge is complete. Now...
Stop!
We're out of time. I have to get going. Well...
No! Radiation. It's radiation.
Radiation, of course. So it can be used.
But how much? I do not know.
Radiation denatures their reproductive cells, preventing them from mating.
Same principle as the sterilization technique. The reproductive cells are more sensitive to radiation than the rest of the body. But I have not tested it. There is no telling what mutation could result, or how the host may be affected. Not to mention what could happen if this is done post-infection.
I don't care. This plan goes into action now. As long as it works, the details can wait. You wouldn't be lying to me, of course, old man.
I can guarantee nothing.
I owe you my life. My body has been burned on countless occasions, but it survives, thanks to your children. That is why I trust you.
Then do not repeat my mistake.
What's that?
In the West, it is said that the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. In the East, it is said the man of flesh brings spiritual power to words. The people knew back then that these creatures carry the gospel. They do not belong in our hands. They must not be touched.
How enlightening. I'll remember that. Consider this my thanks.
What are you?
Catch.
No!
Well then, I'm afraid it really is goodbye this time, Code Talker.
There is no soldier.
Now where did he run off to? Guess he wasn't as obedient as I thought.
There never was any soldier.
So long.
You! How dare you!
I'll give it to him, boy. He came in there dumping with both barrels. Okay, there's a lot to go over.
Forgive me, but the time... Oh, you haven't been beaten? Just like me. What wounds
Jesus
I might
Christ.
inflict, you might feel considerable pain.
That's pretty cool that the parasites heal him, whatever wounds he might inflict. But then the question becomes, to what degree could that be tested? could I grab my CGM, what was it, 25, the 6-piece rocket launcher, and then hit you with it, and then we be cool? Or is there a little less to your healing than that?
But I've no doubt you can withstand it.
Then what do...
I have nothing special. I have given him whenever I ring this bell.
This is
he
a
passes on
classic
message
trick.
for
I've
me.
heard of that one before.
That message is simply.
What if...
It does exactly what it
The
needs
message
to
will
do.
arrive at a room.
Conveys
Some of your
fear,
people are in this room.
lets your imagination run wild. Oh yeah.
I'm in.
It's honestly, it's vicious, but it's a pretty good one.
Not as they tied them up. We had to maintain or
You...
go.
It won't...
True.
Let me
The
see
vocal
now.
cord but what about English?
In English.
I believe he did have the English strain by this time, but you just fell right into that bluff. You let your imagination run wild again. But again, you're not used to this kind of stuff.
Strain.
A ring of if that person abandons the.
You...
So it's quite simple. Every time I.
Not
ring
to
the
mention, he then spoke a while back about how his people are speaking English a lot more. What was the term he used? Nishone. Something about love, but his people no longer use it the same way because they use English more than they do Navajo.
Another of your people is infected.
Don't do this.
I think he said sometimes
want-
it can be used to convey like a feeling of love or like a beauty, like a beautiful scenery, amazing artwork, you know, an attractive person, something like that.
This, I'd rather not have to ring, which is why I'm hoping.
This is if
you
I'm
talk to
remembering it correctly.
What do you...
You know how to prevent the symptom.
You cannot control it like some slave.
Forget it.
I will never... What have you...
You.
You...
Well,
Okay.
all you need to do is.
Why?
The adult soldiers at Walayamasa are all dead.
What?
The parasite traveled downstream.
Yeah, that's one of those. We weren't aware of it, but people. We're not guilty, but we're not innocent. It's like I was saying earlier. Your intent might not have been the case, but people are still dead because we drained all that oil, and that water was sent downstream to Walayamasa. People are still dead, regardless of our intention. I hate to put a percentage to those kind of things, but it is a 50% kind of thing where it's our fault. Not all our fault, but we're not innocent in this.
It would appear that he was involved. Another demon who woke up as a result. He is becoming an annoyance. He may one day. He too.
Black.
You know, this incident made I should have acted with more humility. These creatures cannot be controlled. All the more reason I require a means to stop them.
Is that your legitimate stance, or is that just you saying that so you can appeal to his good nature and get him to tell you what you want to know? Because I could actually believe that you might now believe that you stepped into something that you can't do anything about, setting aside your own infection. I could actually believe that you are concerned about this.
There is no...
Still, you're a
Wait,
manipulator,
don't-
so
It is
you're a ghost. It's what you were trained to do. It's who you are.
They are in pursuit of... You would have most likely your mother tongues as well.
Yeah.
You've-
Him getting infected, I don't think that had anything to do with Code Talker. But I do think Code Talker knew it was going to happen. Because if memory serves, I think that's how he said he was partly infected, other than just introducing them to himself. I think he said that also infected him a little bit. So yeah, I figured he knew it was going to happen, but made it a point not to warn him. Oh, okay.
Is this your... People go and never bought... You heard me. What?
Yep.
What are you doing?
And then you tell him, I'm not saving you, and then he says, okay, well, ding ding. You must not realize I'm the type who will flip the table. Ha ha. If I'm
probably had
losing,
meaning all
everybody
the world's
loses.
length, but that's, if need be, I might.
And that means nothing to you.
A few words, and besides, the time is not yet right to show this face in my homeland.
Makes me wonder why the time ain't right to show his face in his homeland. Did he do something, or is he just trying not to be seen until he can achieve something? Or is it a bit of both?
Not until my... And besides, a few words here.
Otherwise, you will die. If you are infected, and that means nothing.
If need be, I myself can produce whatever... But that suits
So he's
me
willing to
fine.
be a worldwide weapon,
That means
even more
Few
so.
words, and besides... Now,
stop.
we're... well...
Lack of patience.
Radiation. It's radiation.
Radiation, of course. So it can be used.
I wonder about
How
this.
much? I do not know.
Radiation
To an extent, he's not telling him the truth.
denatures their reproductive cells, preventing them from mating.
Same principle as the sterilization technique. The reproductive cells are more sensitive to radiation than the rest of the body. But I have not tested it. There is no telling what mutation could result, or how the host may be affected. Not to mention what could happen if this is done post-infection.
I don't.
Yeah, that's what I thought. You see, he gave us the Wolbachia, but he didn't use radiation, at least as far as I know. But what we do know is that radiation does affect these things because of Huey doing his radiation experiment, mutating them, and then getting a whole bunch of people killed. But I don't know if this radiation method is going to be what solves the problem, or what could solve the problem. It sounds to me more like he's trying to set him up to trick him into chemo.
Care. This, as long as it works,
I can guarantee.
I owe you. My body has been burned on countless occasions, but it survived. That is
Then do not repeat.
what's
In the West, it is said in the East, it is said the man of flesh bring in the West. It is said that the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. In the East, it is said the man of flesh brings spiritual power to words. The people knew back then that these creatures carry the gospel. They do not belong in our hands.
Interesting. So the Word became flesh. So then, effectively, the Word became a part of us as a natural thing. The Word became us. But then, it also says that flesh gave the Word spiritual power, which is true too. A word only has power that you give it. Otherwise, it's just gibberish. But then he says he uses that as proof, or not necessarily proof, but as a good concept as to why it is we should leave them alone. It's a sensible thought. Especially, the way I like to think of it is it's possible for an entire species to be wrong. But if multiple cultures are coming to the same thought, separated by thousands of years, hundreds, maybe thousands of miles, entirely deeply ingrained and often unusual philosophies compared to each other, then it stands to reason maybe there might be some truth to this here. If not a lot of truth, maybe a little bit. And it always starts with a little bit.
They must not be touched.
consider this.
What are you?
Catch.
No!
And then the classic trick
I'm
of,
afraid it really
nope,
is goodbye.
it didn't
this
really
time.
happen. But hey, It still can. I have no reason to come back here, Cold Talker, but if I do, I mean, I'm sure you understand how our conversations are going to be going there, buddy, old pal, old friend. But this is going to be the end of episode 34 of the tape recap, folks. Well, we should have at least one, maybe two more, but I doubt there'll be another two. And maybe I'll return to this playthrough. Oh yeah, we've definitely got another two, maybe three. I'll definitely return to this playthrough from time to time for like the occasional FOB run or something. But if you folks like what you see and want to see more of me, give me a like, follow, subscribe here on YouTube or both. Drop a comment, check out some of my other playlists. Follow the links to my Twitch to get to my YouTube. Follow the links to my YouTube to get to my Twitch. And wherever you folks happen to be, have yourselves a good morning, afternoon, evening, or night. God bless you.